Hello, everyone. My name is Tony Braun, and welcome to today's session on designing and selling Auracast solutions. We have people joining us from all over the globe today, so wherever you are, a sincere thank you for making the time to join us and learn about this groundbreaking new technology. Before we jump too far into the agenda here, we do have just a couple of housekeeping items. First of all, as you joined as attendees, all of your microphones and cameras are disabled, so we can all clearly hear our expert guests that we've invited. I would invite you to submit your questions using the Q&A function within Microsoft Teams. Our team will be monitoring those questions, and we'll get to as many of those as we can at the end of the session. Note that the Q&A function here is different than the online chat, so please make sure you're using Q&A as we won't be monitoring the chat function. All right, so with that, let's talk a little bit about our agenda for today. Earlier this year, Williams AV introduced our new Auracast-based Infinium broadcast system. And as we did so, two things became immediately clear. One, there's a very large appetite for this next generation technology because of its capabilities in Pro AV environments. The second is that there are a lot of unanswered questions out there about what Auracast is, how does it work, where does it best fit? So in an effort to help educate the market, our team went to work gathering the most common questions that we get surrounding Auracast and assembled an expert panel today to help us answer those questions and hopefully bring up your knowledge level and comfort level with Auracast. So that is our session. Let me jump into introducing first myself. I'm with Tony Braun with Williams AV. I help lead the sales and marketing efforts here, and I will help facilitate today's session. I get to work with a fantastic team here at Williams AV, and I want to personally thank them, Nancy, Sydney, and a number of others here who worked really hard to pull this off today, and I hope that you see a lot of value in it. So next, I'll introduce our panelists. The first is Chuck Sabin. Chuck is Vice President of Technology and Market Development for the Bluetooth SIG. If you're not familiar with that term, the Bluetooth SIG, that is the Bluetooth Special Interest Group. And this is the organization that oversees the development of Bluetooth standards and licenses that technology. We're really happy to have Chuck here today. He has been one of the driving forces behind Auracast. And also a shout out to Chuck's colleague, Henry Wong, who's a key resource at the SIG that's been super supportive of Williams as we've gone through this process. So welcome to the panel, Chuck.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yep, happy to have you here. Our second panelist is Nathan Barrios. Nathan joins us today from Sydney, Australia. He is the team leader for the technical sales and support group at Amber Technology. Amber is the exclusive distributor of Williams AV products throughout all of Australia. Nathan, by way of background, is a degreed audio engineer. He's been in the Pro AV space for over 20 years, and at least half of that, he's focused on assistive technologies. So a great person to be part of our panel today. Australia, by the way, is one of those markets that's proving to be early adopters of Auracast technologies, which means Nathan has been having conversations around Auracast for quite some time. So Nathan, welcome to the panel.
Hello, everyone. Thanks very much for being here.
Yep. And last but not least is our very own Ricardo Aramjan. Ricardo leads our technical solutions team here at Williams AV, but he's been in the AV space again for over 25 years, designing, deploying, and supporting Pro AV technologies of all types in a variety of markets and venues. So really well-rounded individual on our team. Ricardo and his team here at Williams have been in the thick of the launch of our Auracast system, Infinium, and he's currently working with a number of venues around the globe that are looking to implement this technology and has been a contributor to what are the common questions, what are the design things that must be considered. So you're going to hear a lot from Ricardo today. Welcome, Ricardo.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So now that we've met our three gurus, we'll jump right into the agenda. One more reminder here to enter your own questions into the Q&A function of Teams. Our team will be collecting those in the background and trying to filter to those questions that we did not answer during today's webinar, and we'll try and save some time at the end to address as many of those as we can. The session today is being recorded. No need to request slides. After the meeting today, we'll send out a link and that you can view the recording later. So again, thank you to everybody for joining. All right, I'm going to start with Chuck. Want to get some fundamentals here around Auracast. So Chuck, for those who might be new to Auracast, can you kind of explain how it differs from traditional Bluetooth audio and what it was specifically designed to address?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it's fair to start that, LE audio, the Auracast is integral to what we consider LE audio, which is the new architecture for Bluetooth audio for the future. That LE audio will ultimately replace classic audio, which people know and love today, but with this new flexible audio architecture that has new designs and design flexibility and the ability to add new capabilities. So all new capabilities that you see coming from Bluetooth in the future will be on this LE audio architecture. Auracast is one of those capabilities. Auracast itself is an ability for a Bluetooth device to be able to broadcast an audio signal to an unlimited number of in-range devices, either in private settings or in public settings. There's no pairing associated with that. So the big difference between what you know in audio today versus Auracast is that in audio today, you have essentially a paired relationship, a personal relationship between you and your device, you and your phone or you and your speakers. With Auracast, this is more about providing a broadcast capability for an unlimited number of people to be able to tune into a broadcast, generally designed for public spaces, and public spaces could be conference rooms, conference centers, theaters, gyms, bars, transit stations, anywhere you have public audio that you need to address public audio to a large number of people, you now have this capability through Auracast. And that's its big difference in what it's trying to address, is that mass one-to-many concept of audio to many people.
Yeah, it makes so much sense. It's something people have been asking for a long time. And it leads me into my next question. The Auracast as a standard has been in the works for quite some time, and there were a lot of people who contributed to what Auracast should be and what is that standard. So can you talk a little bit about who are some of the key organizations behind the development of the standard and how that collaboration is now driving adoption?
Yeah, I think it's important to note that all this really started from the hearing aid companies all coming to the Bluetooth organization to say we need to standardize an audio capability, a wireless audio capability for hearing aids that was low power, easy to use, standardized across multiple platforms around the globe. And that's where it really started. But as soon as the benefits of what they were actually trying to generate through that were coming clear, then you had all of the major platform companies jumping on board to do the development, all the major silicon companies coming on board to do development on this. And then you ultimately saw a number of consumer product devices as well coming on to develop what is ultimately then this new architecture and this new ability for one-to-many devices. So it was not just one company had this idea and started working on it. It became an entire ecosystem event to develop this new architecture and then deliver on the one-to-many capabilities, which is ultimately what Auracast is delivering against.
And I think that's key to why the pendulum seems to be swinging so fast, and this is getting so much momentum already. So one of the questions we get sometimes, Chuck, I hear people talk about, well, Auracast, that's a future technology, or if you have Auracast, you'll be future ready. I think that's a misnomer. I see so many devices coming into the market today that it's not hey, this is something we're going to look forward to. I think it's here. So I would love it if you can share any details about how many Auracast capable devices are out there today. Give people a sense for how the technology is here and now, and how you're seeing growth across hearing aids as well as earbuds, smartphones, things like that.
Yeah, it's a great question, and we get that about a lot. Whereas, is it what's Auracast ready? What's Auracast capable? And ultimately, the capable devices and the enabled devices are what we really count as in market. And currently, we have a product database that we track where companies have qualified their devices and are shipping devices. Currently, there's about 120 Auracast enabled devices in the market today. Of course, Williams is one of those. Is one of those, but it also includes companies like Samsung and Sony and Jabra and Android and Xiaomi, and there are more companies now that are supporting Auracast in the big categories. You're talking about name brand companies that are ultimately supporting Auracast today in their products. And so what we're seeing is that when we think about Auracast is it's an integral part to LE Audio. And so as these companies are transitioning to LE Audio, they're also bringing Auracast in as essentially a new standard feature. So I usually like to say that we generally see Auracast becoming a new standard feature for all audio devices in the future. And that's kind of the trend that we're seeing in the market today. And as operating systems like Android and Apple and Windows and others are picking up on the capability, that'll continue to accelerate the overall availability of devices in the market. So don't mind the 7.7 billion. That's just to show you that Bluetooth does not, Bluetooth is a very large technology and a significant technology in the market. But then with that, when we think about new LE Audio devices, ABI is predicting that by 2029, there will be 3.1 billion Bluetooth-enabled LE Audio devices, and many of those will have Auracast enabled and available for consumers in the market. And again, as the platforms like Android did with Android 16, as they integrate the Auracast capabilities into their devices for personal sharing and for discovery of broadcasts that are available in the market, that number will continue to accelerate and grow.
Yeah, the numbers are staggering. I mean, I've been doing this for a long time too. And to see this much momentum as early as we are is just, it's awesome. Chuck, one of the questions that we get often is that we see products, and you started to touch on this, that we see products that are labeled as Bluetooth 5.3 or Auracast ready. And so how can this audience really decipher or determine if a device is capable today of receiving an Auracast audio stream? And maybe a quick follow-on to that, if the device truly is able to receive an Auracast stream, can you describe a little bit about the different experiences for how someone would join that public broadcast?
Yeah, so there's kind of two questions in there, and I know that the Auracast ready or Auracast capable, type of marketing comes out. The challenge is you have some companies that have the hardware that can support Auracast, but they haven't turned it on with their software. They haven't done that yet, but they want to make sure that they are telling their customers that when we have it available, this product will be able to do Auracast, but may not do it today. The what I would consider more the definitive source at this point in time is that we do run a product database on Bluetooth.com. So if you go to Bluetooth.com/Auracast, there is a product database category there, and you can actually see and view all the products that we are aware of and know of that have qualified their product and are shipping and running Auracast in their devices today. That's the concept behind that product database. Now, as I mentioned it before, this is sort of a short-lived confusion that might be happening in the market. In the long term, this is just going to become a standard capability in all audio devices. And so the confusion should ultimately go away. It's just like anything. Any Bluetooth device, can ultimately, let's say your phone can connect to your car. It's really going to be about, Auracast being standard as part of all of the different products that you ultimately get from consumer products and phones and so on from there. Now, in terms of experiences, That can vary, but that is also getting standardized amongst the platforms. If you think about how you want to actually find an Auracast broadcast, we have what's considered an assistant functionality. The assistant functionality can be implemented into any device. Any receiver can have an assistant functionality, and it can look for available broadcasts that are in the market or in the area where you are. The user just simply selects that broadcast, and the devices themselves that are in the ear just start listening to that broadcast. So there are different ways to do that, but it's generally through this assistant functionality. One way to think about it is the same way that you scan for and look for Wi-Fi access points today in public spaces. You'll be able to scan for and look for Auracast-enabled access points and audio access points in public spaces for the future.
Yeah, that's great. And I think everybody's working on what is that experience, either building in an assistant so it's directly as part of the same listening device, or making that connection between an app on the phone and maybe earbuds or headphones. So, thank you for explaining that. It's a question we get quite often, and people will need to consider what kind of device they're using and the technical ability of the audience to be able to do that and join the stream. So that's great. Thank you, Chuck. I'm going to, now that we have some fundamentals here, or some foundational information about Auracast, I want to switch the questions a little bit to what is the business opportunity around Auracast, and what does that mean, not just for assistive listening, but beyond assistive listening? So Nathan, maybe I'll throw a question your way. Earlier I said that Australia is one of the markets that we've seen a lot of interest. Maybe you can talk a little bit about your conversations with integrators and users, the level of awareness that's developing in Australia for Auracast.
Yeah, it's a fantastic question. I mean, Australia has been known to be early adopters of a lot of technology. We're quite small and nimble as a population. So if I talk to the readiness side of things, if we talk in terms of maybe assisted listening technology for now, we have many technologies out in the market, and they'll have their pros and cons. There's definitely different use cases for all of them. And we've been chasing somewhat of a Goldilocks scenario, where a product that kind of doesn't have all the pros and the cons, it's sort of everything scattered. So the market has been looking in general for this technology, something that can be applied to all of the venues, or all of the rooms in the venues in quite a balanced way. So we've been looking. In terms of the awareness, I mean, we started hearing serious conversations around Auracast probably 24 plus months ago. Again, listening and looking out for this technology to be able to cater to what we're trying to do. And I saw immediate interest almost immediately from customers, particularly our dyed-in-the-wool assisted listening customers that come to us quite frequently, but also from venues that we deal with as well, as they look for new ways of delivering content to their punters in ways that aren't necessarily just for assisted listening, but in order for content delivery. So there's definitely been a lot of hunger for this kind of product. And when the Bluetooth was launched with Auracast as being the option for this, there was immediate interest in it, and that hasn't stopped.
Yeah, that's great. And I'll follow up with Ricardo on the same question, right? So Ricardo and your team, you work with people every day with hearing loops, infrared, FM, things that people might call the traditional and the proven technologies. But talk a little bit about what's happened over, let's say, the last, we have been promoting the pending launch of our product for quite some time as well. But talk about maybe the last 6 months, Ricardo, and how the conversations have changed.
Yeah, so earlier on, when I first started about a year ago on this project, there was a lot of inquiries, and now there's a thirst to this technology and a need. And been doing a lot of designs for stadiums, theaters, house of worships, courtrooms, educational spaces, and the technology's there, and people are hungry for it and excited. And it's not as invasive as a lot of other technologies. And with the Pro AV aspects of it, there's a lot of control that people desire, and the encryption that's there is also very handy. And we have a lot of people interested in this product and purchasing it at the same time.
Yeah, well, and we'll dig more into some of the topics that you mentioned because security and other things come into this. But I heard a few things. For those who are looking to maybe help their customers integrate this technology, that one of the questions we get frequently is, hey, what market verticals, what particular markets are showing the most interest early in Auracast? So I'll throw out a couple here that I think were mentioned that come up quite a bit. Higher education has shown quite a bit of interest given the technical aptitude and how often devices are refreshed. Theaters certainly as well, and even interest from stadiums. So Nathan, maybe for you, what other verticals or what verticals are showing the highest level of interest in Auracast?
Yeah, absolutely. And for those uninitiated, in Australia, assisted listening technologies are legislated. They're required in all builds where there's audio present. So we cover the entire market. Anywhere there's a speaker or audio, there'll be assisted listening technologies. So we kind of cover the entire gamut of venues that would be interested in changing the technology to something more valuable or something more useful. What are they doing? Some of the ones that stand out to me are, again, large venue. Obviously, when we have coverage and line of sight coverage increases as we do now, we have a great ability to service larger areas, which with other technologies was reasonably complicated or not or impossible. Tertiary for me has actually been quite surprising. Tertiary in Australia has been very entrenched in other technologies like infrared for a long time, and I expected them actually to be a little bit slower to market, but they jumped straight at it. They started testing all of the different versions of Auracast, and they were very keen to start rolling this out, which is great. Corporate, again, because of the balance between security and network control and monitoring, which you can only get one or the other with other technologies. We've definitely seen a lot of corporate interests in the last couple of weeks, in fact, talking to major banks about flipping entire branches and buildings into Auracast because of the ability to do security. And some of the weird outliers, like places like gyms. We have a lot of gyms that pop up in shopping centers and places where they perhaps don't want to have public audio playing, or they want to have people able to listen to their audio on their headsets because everyone wears headsets in gyms nowadays. So that's actually been a strange outlier that I've noticed in the last couple of months. But basically, everybody's looking for a place to put this.
Yeah, no, that's great. Chuck, any other particular markets that or verticals that you see are really gravitating towards Auracast?
Yeah, well, a lot of them were mentioned. We've seen new firsts in terms of transportation, stadiums, classrooms. We're also seeing deployments in museums around even tour systems or dedicated audio in museum areas where you have displays and you have exhibits, and you want to have the audio capabilities associated within that environment. We're seeing a lot of interest in that area as well, because that's such a public place for and varying people that are coming in and out of that. They're really looking for opportunities in which they can not only supply equipment for people who walk through the door, but provide better audio experiences for people that with their own equipment as they walk in. So we've seen a lot of excitement there as well. I'll say that we thought that the majority of the early deployments would be like voice only type of applications. We've actually been very surprised with the theater venues and how they have wanted to provide a much better, clear, and an open experience for people using Auracast broadcast in theater environments. And it just goes to show that people who have hearing loss, in this case, they want to experience the richness of these types of experiences. And it's not just about, hearing people talk. It's about the music. It's about the environment and being immersed in those types of environments. So from a pro AV perspective, this is the opportunity to really build out the audio systems within these types of venues that are really trying to provide not just assistive listening, but augmented audio experiences for everyone.
Yeah, there's been a lot of talk in the space that we play in around assistive technologies about Auracast being kind of the next generation of assistive listening, but it is really about audio experience, and it's so much more than that. If I had $1 for every time Ricardo told me that no, it's fitting here, and we could use it in tour and museum and airports and other things for solving way more communication challenges than just assistive listening, and with multiple audio streams supported in the same space. It opens up all kinds of new doors. So to keep us moving along here, I want to talk a little bit about compliance. So Nathan, you said, you mentioned that it is legislated for you. That is for those who may not be familiar with it, there's the Australian standard, or AS 1428, is a similar regulation to the ADA laws here in North America that say a venue must have assistive listening if they're open to the public. So let's talk a little bit about compliance. How could we answer the question, is Auracast a technology that can satisfy ADA or Australian Standard 1428? Maybe I can throw that at you, Chuck.
So are you throwing that to me?
Sure, if you want to.
Our position from the Bluetooth SIG perspective is that Auracast absolutely meets the requirements of the ADA.
Yeah.
The ADA specifically talks about technology types. Radio frequency is one of those technology types. Bluetooth technology is clearly one of those, technologies. And so I give the ADA the benefit of the doubt that they could not have predicted the prevalence of systems like of RF technology like Wi-Fi and Bluetooth, and where Bluetooth was ultimately going with these types of capabilities, but clearly indicated that there are going to be multiple different types of technologies that are going to be necessary in order to meet the requirements of the ADA. That's why they named multiple different types of technology. Bluetooth is one of those RF technologies that is addressing the needs of the ADA, and it is absolutely, in my opinion, in that sense, 100% compliant with the ADA in that sense. And we've talked to people from the ADA, and they've said that's absolutely how we think about the availability of technology to meet the needs of the public. That's what we're trying to do, and that's why you should think about Bluetooth and Auracast in that same way.
Yep, that's exactly our position here at Williams. There's been other technologies, whether they be digital or audio over Wi-Fi. They're all using radio frequency to bring the intended sounds to the desired audience. So, but we just wanted to make sure we answered that question, because it is one that comes up on a regular basis. There is, when we think about things like hearing loops, right? A proven technology, they've worked well, they're very discreet for the users. There have been performance standards through the IEC that talk about the performance of hearing loops in certain spaces to make sure that we have an even field of coverage and the audio quality meets certain. Is there anything like that developing for Auracast?
So there is an effort inside IEC to put together certain levels of performance standards associated with an Auracast deployment in a public location as an insurance to having good deployments in the local areas. I'll say that the big difference between, because that was a lot of that came from hearing loop installations and telecoil implementations and the variances on how things were being deployed, because ultimately there was no standards organization around what telecoil was or what loops were and how hearing aids should ultimately operate. The big difference here is that Bluetooth and Auracast is a standard. It is a public standard that is adhered to and qualified to by all of the devices that are ultimately implementing the technology. Everyone from the transmitters to the assistants to the receivers are all testing against each other and qualifying against the standards associated with the technology. And so with that kind of testing, your insurance and ability for one person to be able to take a product from one manufacturer and operate with a product from another manufacturer is insured through the actual qualification, testing, and specification process of the Bluetooth SIG. Now, are there going to be bad implementations of Auracast? Probably. And will some other type of a body trying to adhere those help? Maybe. But really, I look at Williams and the education that you provide to your installers and your distributors, and the quality that you drive through your ecosystem to really sort through what's the best way to deploy this type of implementation in a location. And it really depends on the location but your education, your guidance, and the standardization that we're providing in the market already should cover 99% of all of the challenges, so to speak, that are available in the market today.
Yeah, and that's a perfect segue, because I want to direct some questions to Nathan and to Ricardo, who are interacting with a lot of these venues, saying, how do we do this? And one of the questions there is about bridging this gap between the traditional technologies that are proven and people know how to connect with, and whether they're using a hearing loop or infrared or FM, and then the increasing number of devices that are making their way in that are Auracast enabled or will be Auracast enabled. So maybe for you, Ricardo, so as more consumers are getting these devices in public spaces that already have some of the traditional technologies, what steps or what should an integrator think about to help the clients balance their existing technology with this Auracast movement?
Sure, yeah. Well, I wouldn't say throw it away by any means, but I think redundancy is always good in the hearing assistance world. And because it is a newer technology, and although all our newer hearing aids are adapting this technology currently, but there are still a lot of folks who have some of the older technology. Maybe they don't have the funds or the willingness to upgrade. So in my opinion, I would hang on to the older technologies and let them naturally fade out as time goes on and it fully gets implemented, at least as far as Auracast goes. But that would be my suggestion.
Yeah, Nathan, anything you'd add to that?
Look, I mean, these will, as Ricardo said, these will be running in parallel with legacy systems for quite a while. And a lot of the considerations for me at the technical side of considerations, how do we remove an existing technology and replace it with an Auracast technology? And luckily, Williams have come up with a product that actually solves a lot of these implementation problems, like the audio from the room goes to an existing rack location, not into the ceiling cavity, perhaps because there's a loop there. We have a two-part system that allows us to make use of where the audio comes out in the system. Things like pin code and security that we'll lose with line of sight based technologies like IR are added into Infinium product for having pin code. So these things, in terms of how they're implemented by a venue, should feel very natural and easy to cross over. And in terms of the usability and the user experience, with the exception of hearing loops, which are generally moving in, at least in Australia, to a more aging demographic and venues that perhaps are not being frequented as much by that demographic of people, most of the technologies revolve around either a BYOD or a provide receiver. In this case, Auracast is exactly the same comfort level, only with a better performance and a better audio quality. So it shouldn't feel unfamiliar to venues on how they manage it, how they deploy it, or customers and how they use it.
Nice. Kind of another question in that same vein. So there's Chuck talked about the number of devices that are coming onto the market. Some of them are receivers, some of them are transmitters, some of them are intended for consumer use, like TV listening systems, and others are meant to be large area public broadcast systems. So, Ricardo, I'll start with you on this one. What should, if an integrator is looking at all these different technologies that are available to them, what do you look for in terms of a pro AV piece of equipment that's going to serve a large space and be reliable and part of that overall ecosystem?
Yeah, well, one of the beauties is something that can live in a rack, doesn't have to live behind a TV or in a ceiling somewhere, but Dante is a huge factor. All new deployments today, and even the current ones over the last years, have adopted AES67 and Dante, which our product also supports. Balanced inputs and outputs, that's a huge pro AV technology that you won't see in consumer products. And then the range of our products or similar products like ours that will provide that you may not get out of a consumer level, but really it's the inputs, the outputs, the external control, API control, and being able to send commands and DSPs to put their hooks into these devices, put passcodes on touch panels, something that you would traditionally see in most all modern AV products that you wouldn't get in consumer products.
Yeah, perfect. Chuck, you looked like you had something you were going to add there.
No, I think that there is the flexibility to have sort of DIY, as Ricardo was saying. There are going to be lots of variances in the types of devices that are available to the market. Again, this is about providing a wireless audio infrastructure to the masses, right? And there are going to be devices that are going to be professionally installed, that are going to be network managed, they're going to be roaming, there's a whole host of capabilities that are necessary in a lot of these larger venues and professional venues that you just don't need for a consumer in their home to plug in the back of their TV. But plugging something into the back of the TV is absolutely a necessity for people with hearing loss or people who are wanting these wireless audio experiences. So the range of devices is gonna grow, but the professional side of it is really going to be where you've got these larger venues and more professional audio environments that you're going to need more of these additional capabilities for management.
Yeah, beautiful. I want to shift some of the questions here. We've got about 10 or 12 minutes left, and then we want to open it up to questions from the audience. I want to shift to some design and deployment related questions. So I'll start with you, Nathan. We typically, there's a lot of people on the line here who are designers. They're the people who have to go out and make this stuff work in a venue. So we generally recommend, with whatever the technology is, a site survey. What are some of the things that people are going to want to consider when they go on site? What are the considerations they're going to want to look for as it relates to Auracast?
Yeah, very good question. So when we think of Auracast, obviously we've mentioned a number of times, this lives within an RF spectrum. So your usual rules of RF apply. You should be doing site scans. You should be aware of what the RF spectrum looks like, particularly if it's not a greenfield site. And if it is a greenfield site, perhaps the digital site inspection being understanding what other technologies are going to be in there. Obvious things like Wi-Fi, but anything working on 2.4 is critical. You need to have a good understanding of what your expected range and coverage is for these units. Particularly relevant if you're doing a lot of dense, small, packed meeting spaces or huddle spaces where the opposite applies. The range is what you want to compromise intentionally so that you can allow for your channel density. So understanding the lay of what the venue is supposed to just trying to uncover. And then understanding, again, the construction style. What walls are made of, what ceilings are made of, what are your heights and dimensions, how far away from each transmitter is the next transmitter, and understanding the lay of the land. This is critical for not only when you're doing your initial site survey, but obviously when you're doing your commissioning, that's going to be critical, particularly when other vendors come online with the Wi-Fi and other things. And after the fact, in fact, nothing's worse than getting a call from a customer saying the thing didn't work because they didn't tell you that some other guy was going to come in with some other thing later and put it in and suddenly have to re-channel coordinate. So if you have any background in just any kind of RF understanding and how it works in venue, the rules for that apply here and can be shaded and manipulated as required. Again, another part of Infinium, the ability for us to shade our gain as required allows us to do a much closer pack of single transmitters for channel density. But understanding these is critical to making this work.
Yeah, beautiful. Ricardo, you've been doing a lot of work with the Infinium system in different venues. Anything you would add to Nathan's comments?
Yeah, no, Nathan, you nailed it. 2.4 is the world in which we live in, and you need to be aware of your surroundings. Placement of your transmitters is going to be extremely important. Where the venue is going to allow you to put a transmitter too, especially if it's a theater. The colors, these are paintable devices, at least our transmitters are. So that's something I'd also keep in consideration. And then the networking backbone and what your switch availability is and how much range expansion you're going to have and how many ports and PoE you'll need available to deploy these types of systems.
Yeah, so I'm bouncing around a little on our questions now, guys. So one of the questions that we've touched on a little bit here, everybody's made some references to range or coverage. So as it relates to the Infinium product, Ricardo, maybe you can talk a little bit about how people should think about range. What does that look like under ideal circumstances? We already talked about some of the things that might have an impact on it, but what does that look like under ideal conditions?
Yeah, so 100 meters or 328 feet is the ideal range and the ideal conditions. And as we all know, we don't always get dealt with ideal conditions, but getting these in the air and into center placements is ideal. And otherwise, these are built, again, these are Pro AV types devices. So they're like the consumers. We can mesh these out. We can expand the ranges by just adding more transmitters. So if we do feel that there are some dropouts in certain obscure corners or areas with a lot of dense walls like brick, we can always add another transmitter. And yeah, that's
And when you say 328 feet or 100 meters, you're talking about a radius, right, from the placement of the transmitter. So placement 100%. Of the transmitter becomes super important. And then you've got 328 feet or 100 meters this way and this way in a sphere, or you've described it before as omni coverage. Is that correct?
Yeah. For instance, we deployed one in a house of worship that seats 4,500 people, an extremely large space, and one transmitter not only to cover the entire space, it also covered the mezzanine. It covered, it went through there was an air wall, it went through 2 walls and covered the entrance area as well. Would I put maybe an extra transmitter there to avoid any dropouts? Probably, but that's a pretty broad amount of coverage from one transmitter.
Yeah. So let's talk about scalability, right? Whether it's a Williams solution or something else. When you've got a very large venue, right, where there's a lot of interest coming from stadiums, whether those are indoor or outdoor, and one transmitter is not going to cover that. Talk a little bit, maybe Nathan, you can take this one first, of how do you go about scaling a system like this if you do need coverage in multiple spaces or the same audio just delivered to more geography?
Yeah, so I mean, the consideration would be the same way as you would do Wi-Fi, where you have multiple access points of transmitters that will mesh together and then seamless handover as you wander through those spaces. So that's technology I know we're working on within the product to allow us to be able to walk through. So this covers a number of things. You know, maybe a large stadia where there's clearly only one audio source, or perhaps there's 2 audio sources and translation services on our second channels, or there's local audio within second channels and global audio within first. We can mesh and deliver that either in the product or before the product in DSP quite neatly. And the idea is that we shouldn't require a user to have any change to their device or channel settings as they migrate through a space. This is also very valuable when you consider the use in transport hubs, where you want to walk through a large railway station or airport, for instance, and not have to worry about locating yourself channel-wise unless you need to. Perhaps you're sitting at a gate, you want to listen to a gate, but you also want to listen to general call for the entire venue. So that all comes down to meshing and distribution of audio through meshed access points. And you would do that with the same consideration as you do for single points, understanding the spectrum and RF that's happening within the space and deploying them with the density required and the shading required to cover those spaces off.
Yeah, nice. Anything you'd add, Chuck or Ricardo?
You guys are the experts on the installation side of it, so I'm going to let you guys take that question.
All right.
Yeah, I agree 100% with Nathan. Knowing your environment, what kind of RF interference there may be in structural things, whether you have steel pan and cement walls, and then I would place accordingly based off after those theories and to cover a large space. The other thing I consider too is that we have power control in these transmitters, and then controlling your own power, your own transmission, especially when you start doing room combined divide scenarios. And again, that goes back to the Pro AV, because we have control and because of the DSP routing, we have that type of flexibility where we can control the output of these transmitters and expand it as well.
Yeah,
that's a great point. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I was going to say one thing to to consider, and I think Ricardo's bringing it up here, is that, we're talking about broadcast audio. So for the audience that's unfamiliar with the difference between, let's say, Auracast and how Auracast is implemented in Pro AV transmitters like what Williams has versus, let's say, a consumer device like a mobile phone, is that you have much more flexibility in a couple of ways. One is in your output power, that you can do in order to cover a larger area with a higher output power. And the other is there is no two-way communication between the transmitter and the receiver. The synchronization information of the audio comes from the transmitter itself. So everybody is hearing the audio at the exact same time through the exact same synchronization. And because the receiving devices operate at so much lower power, they're not having to respond back and acknowledge the receipt back to the transmitter. So you can ultimately get further range from those devices as well, because all they're doing is listening. They're not trying to find a way to communicate back on the same distance as a high power transmitter. And that's a very significant difference in terms of your range. So don't think of it like a consumer, your one-to-one relationship that about Bluetooth today. You got to think about it much in for the future.
Yeah, it's a great point. We always think about more power is better, but in certain cases we need to limit that power to limit the amount of overlap in signals, especially in venues, whether they're courthouses or higher education, where we need to control the amount of signal overlap. So that's great. One of the things that also comes up, because we're not just talking about a broadcast that everybody may want to hear. When we're talking about corporate applications, when we're talking about higher education, a question of security often comes up about, well, this isn't, the system supports multiple streams. I don't want everybody to hear every stream. I might not want the audio accessible outside of a particular courtroom. So Ricardo, maybe you can talk a little bit about, at least in how our system, how do we manage those type of security requests?
Yeah, well, we have passcode or PIN code encryption that we can incorporate, which could also live on a touch panel or have a randomization type scenario, or you can put them in scheduling agents. You could trigger them through Microsoft Exchange. So if it's like an educational space, as the classrooms change over from whatever science class to a math class, you could have a passcode change that is unique to that specific day in that specific class. And again, it goes back to the Pro AV, is because we have the API control. We can pretty much put the hooks of just about any functionality of this system through a DSP or a commercial AV processor.
Yeah, beautiful, beautiful. Well, for the three panelists here, before I open it up to some questions that I'm getting over here on my other screen coming from our audience, thanks to the team that's trying to compile those for me, is there any others kind of key messages that you want to leave with this audience about when they're thinking about Auracast, whether it's a deployment question or use case scenarios? Is there any other nugget that you want to make sure that this audience hears?
I think what I will emphasize is something that you said, which is, anything that can be an audio source can be an Auracast broadcast source as well. And you think about any venue that has public or audio address systems, the ability to integrate a broadcast capability for multiples of uses, from translation to assistive listening to audio description for people who are blind, to any number of models of how you want to use broadcast audio. You now have the flexibility to do that very quickly and very easily as an integrated part of what you deliver to a venue or to a location.
Yeah, beautiful.
Yeah. And I go back to you, Chuck. This is an audio experience when you think of it as into a theater or a nightclub or even a stadium. We have a stadium here in Minneapolis called the US Bank Stadium, and the number one thing that people complain about is that you hear it 3 times. There's a lot of echo. It's not the greatest listening experience, but imagine having that full immersion. I think that's an important concept of a way to look at this, but also think of it as a lot of people wear hearing protection. So I think of it as hearing protection when you think of noise canceling headphones versus hearing protection, where it's already diminishing some of the audio frequencies that you may want to hear. You can tune up the outside and you can dial in your own mix, and you have this pristine mix at 48K right off of a soundboard. It's quite remarkable.
Yeah, that's a fair assessment.
Yeah, good. All right, so I'm going to switch over here. We have about 10 minutes or so remaining, and try and take some questions that have come in through the chat. So I'm going to pick these in no particular order. And so one here says that they're an interpretation business and looking for an application with several channels. So I guess there's a question there about how many channels can we support, and can you name the channels to identify the specific languages for that channel, and with receivers that you could provide to customers that display that channel. So I'll throw that at either Nathan or Ricardo, because it's specific to the Williams product.
Sure. I mean, look, in terms of the implementation of doing that, absolutely you can name the channels, so that if you're using either the Williams receiver or the app, you'll have a channel name that you could obviously name to be the language that's being used. Outside of Auracast, obviously Williams also have interpretation products that will support the floor language and the movement around of those languages as well. So beyond just the transmission, we can also support the entire envelope of that and how it's used. But Ricardo, do you want to talk about channel density and channel counts?
Yeah, so our devices per transmitter, you can broadcast 2 channels, but again, you can expand that. Each transmitter can duplicate that to another 2 channels, to another 2 channels. So, we don't like to see more than 20 of them within close proximity, but that there is 40 channels, which should cover most people's interpretation needs.
Yep.
And then some.
Good. Thank you. This one might be a little hard to answer, but I'll throw it out for the group anyway. The question comes from Jeff. Thank you, Jeff. With several Android manufacturers able to support Auracast, when do we see other platforms like Apple, iOS, bake in support? So I'm not sure that we can answer that. Does anybody have any information I might not be aware of?
So sorry, go ahead.
Go
You
ahead.
got information, please.
The radios live in the phone, but they haven't turned the switch on, and I haven't heard them really talk about it much, but we can see that it's there and sniff it out. And there are apps that do support that radio and can sniff out other Bluetooth LE products, but or at least the frequencies that are living in that range. But other than that, that's all I know about from the Apple side.
Yeah. So the way I'd express this question very quickly is that Android through Android 16 is integrating it across their main tree. So all Android devices are now taking on integrated Auracast capabilities, and that is their first showing. That's their first showing for it, and they'll continue to expand the capabilities and the user experience throughout the Android environment to the entire Android ecosystem. So that's a massive ecosystem. Everyone always asks about iOS, what's going on with iOS, and we know it's just a matter of time. We just don't know the when associated with that. Now, some companies, as we were talking about it earlier, some receiver companies like a Sennheiser or a JBL and so on, they all have applications that actually run on top of iOS, and you can actually use that application to control the hearing device to find a broadcast and listen to a broadcast. So there are application ways that manufacturers are mitigating the iOS integration issue until they actually have it integrated. And as soon as they do, then you can use the native capabilities in the same way.
Yeah,
Chuck,
thank you.
I think you brought up a good point too, and the audience should also know that the stream comes to the earbud or the headphones, not to the phone particularly. The app just points to what stream you want to listen to. So you may have a phone that's not compatible with Auracast or Bluetooth LE, like mine. But I have headphones that are, and the app points to the stream that my earbuds or headphones I choose to listen to.
Yes.
Yep. All right, well, I'll jump to the next question, and it's under the heading of notifying people. So how, if I'm a hearing aid wearer and I've invested in the latest and greatest hearing aids that are Auracast enabled, and I have headphones or earbuds that I use, how would somebody know that that venue has implemented Auracast? What's the best way? I'll say from a manufacturer standpoint, we try to follow all of the legislative guidelines, whether that's ADA or AS 1428, which always require some signage to let people know that it's there, usually at the entrance to a particular space that has hearing enabled. But I know, Chuck, the SIG is also taking steps to help publicize what venues are adopting the technology.
Yeah, we provide guidance to installers about signage. Of course, there's the international symbol for hearing assistance, and we provide guidance for how that international symbol can also incorporate the Auracast name for visibility around that. We also, depending on the venue and what the intent of the venue is, we also have a stylized logo as well that can be posted on the door, similar to your Wi-Fi symbol. You can have an Auracast symbol on the outside, indicating to the audience that there is something available there. And then as it gets integrated into the operating environments, there are going to be, similar to how you get notified, hey, there's a Wi-Fi access point available here. You're going to see this type of innovation make its way into the Auracast ecosystem as well, where users have the ability to get just automatic notifications by their choice as to whether or not an Auracast capability is available in the market.
Yeah, I know one of the steps we're taking too is anytime an Infinium system is shipped to one of our venues or to one of our integrators who puts it in, we're including information in the box on how that venue could register that they are an Auracast enabled space. And I think eventually the hope is that makes it as an item on a Google map or an Apple map where people can find those types of locations. So we will certainly do our part to encourage people to communicate when they've invested in this technology. Next question here, I'll read it as is from Matt. Thank you, Matt. One of the current university projects mandates induction loops for accessibility. Is Auracast adoption in hearing aids mature enough to replace a loop in educational and performing spaces, or is a hybrid approach still recommended?
I could tip in a little bit of that in particularly in Australia, because we continue to see, particularly in public education, primary and secondary, hearing loops defined in various places. In fact, I do as many hearing loop designs today for primary and secondary as I ever have. But as I mentioned before, the demographic of people using TCOL-enabled hearing aids is migrating, obviously, towards older and older people. And so we are still having these loops installed in critical areas where public is accessing, say admin counter, and in the school hall where grandma wants to come in and listen to the kids do the Christmas carols. But throughout the rest of the venue, we're seeing a hybrid of technologies. Public education has specific ones they prefer. Within the private realm, particularly those ones that say cath ed, they have technologies they prefer. But we are still seeing a hybrid in particularly in education spaces. When it comes to what you put in, though, understanding the demographic of the people that are going to be attending your venue is going to be reasonably critical. While technologies like Auracast are still capable of interacting with people with TCOL-enabled headsets, with neck loops, as we have with other technologies that aren't looped for many years, you wouldn't do that perhaps in a nursing home where the majority of users are going to be using TCOLs. So understanding the venue you're putting it into, and then having a real negotiation with the stakeholders of the venue, and perhaps with whoever's enforcing the ADA or BCA, whoever is requirements, to have a real world understanding is important, because all of the technologies are, when implemented correctly, covered by at least the standards that I have to worry about. And then it just becomes the deliverable and what is best for the user who has to interact with it.
Yeah, great answer. Great answer. Maybe, Ricardo, I'll ask you to take this one. Right, people if they understand enough about Bluetooth, they understand it operates in the 2.4 spectrum. We talked about it a little bit earlier, but the question is, well, what do we tell clients who are concerned about Auracast interfering with other 2.4 gigahertz traffic in their facility? How do you respond to that? And if there is a very 2.4 dense space, is there a way to overcome that density?
Well, that's a good question, and this is technology that's new out in the wild. In a normal environment, I've seen great performance. Now, if I'm at Infocom, where there's thousands of 2.4 frequencies blasting all over the place, and not including my own Wi-Fi doesn't get very far, and I have complications in those types of environments, that's where I've seen it really degrade. But so far, fingers crossed, it's been quite successful into a moderate to upper moderate Wi-Fi scenario. Again, the places like ISE and Infocom and all 2.4 seems to just pardon my French, fart out in those areas and not perform as they should. But I wouldn't be terribly concerned with your normal corporate environment. But these extreme areas, I would be concerned.
Yeah.
And go ahead, Jack.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, in these areas that are more dense, right? We're talking about super hostile trade show environments, but we've seen good performance. And I think one of the answer is just like with a hearing loop, there is ways to compensate through that for design. So when it is a HEPI 2.4 space, we are able to add additional transmitters to help overcome some of that. The other thing that we're seeing is more and more devices moving out of the 2.4 spectrum to create some space, right? A lot of devices are going to 5 gigahertz or even 6 gigahertz and creating some more room. So but we haven't really come across a venue yet where we couldn't find a path to make this work. Yeah. What were you going to say, Chuck?
I just add that, Bluetooth technology and in how it was designed, with frequency hopping capabilities and so on, it is one of the most friendly technologies in harsh environments. But you're right, to trade shows like ISE and so on, these dense environments, all RF is going to have potentially some challenges in there. And we've seen, and I think the concept of doing a site survey, I think, is very important, because we have seen installers working towards things like channel management and really trying to get better about their channel management, where they might have just thrown up a bunch of Wi-Fi access points in the past. They're now, okay, wait a second, there's a lot of things that we need to do in terms of managing the RF spectrum inside this location. And so we're going to manage the channels appropriately. We're going to put guard bands up. We're going to make sure that we are providing the best opportunity for the best experience for the user. And that's just a good installer. We'll do those kinds of things in those types of environments. But generally speaking, I don't think you're going to run into any of those challenges.
Yeah, and there are affordable tool sets now for RF frequency analyzers and things of that nature. So those have been extremely helpful for us to identify what's going on in these spaces. And like Tony said, the people are migrating to more of a 5G and 6G now, where hopefully we make more room for this space.
Excellent. Well, we're at the top of the hour here, so I want to thank all of our panelists. Chuck, Nathan, Ricardo, thank you for sharing your expertise. Our goal today was really to help answer some of the most common questions and the things that people are thinking about before taking the leap into Auracast. Auracast is here. We are investing heavily in it, in not just the product that we're shipping today, but multiple iterations. So you can expect more coming from Williams AV. And we will look to do more of these kind of sessions as our knowledge about how this product is performing in all kinds of venues evolves, new applications, and what those challenges might be and how we overcome those. So thank you again to each of our panelists. Thank you everyone who took the time to attend today or took the time to watch this webinar after the fact. There is some information on the screen if you'd like to learn more about the Infinium system from Williams AV. But with that, I'll say thank you once again, and we'll sign off. Thank you, everybody.
Yes, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Earl.
Thank you.